Good morning. So I lowered the exposure of the camera, so let's see if this one is going to be better. Like the other ones that were pretty light. But yeah, so it's Monday. Monday is, like yesterday was the first day of the week, but today is like the first work day, and I'm really struggling with productivity and with kind of getting things done, but I'm still pushing through it and I'm making some progress. I think that this whole situation, this whole reality that I've been dealing with right now, like it's a good it's good for me to kind of like develop resilience, so that even if I'm struggling, I still am gonna get something done. And also finding strategies. Exercising is a good one. I think I do rely on that a lot. I have my little machine here that simulates steps, and then I like sometimes I feel that things are not flowing. I go and I exercise for 10 or 15 minutes, and it's kind of like helpful. Also, I'm going back to when it comes to writing, to kind of like consuming content that makes me inspired to write, not only inspired but like that gives me ideas. So that's kind of like where I am at right now. But apart from like this, things are good. I have been eating more and I've been struggling to sleep, not because of insomnia necessarily. I think that I'm just I have a lot of energy, have plenty of energy, and then like that gets in the way of me sleeping. But it is something that I have like an appointment with my doctor next week, so I'm gonna narrate all these things, and hopefully there's something that we can do, some medication that we can change. I'm just hoping for the best. I'm hoping that there's a way for things to go back to how they were, and honestly if they don't, like I'm gonna survive. I will survive. I will push through. It might take a little like more time for things to happen, but they're still going to happen regardless. And something positive that I have to share is that basically I am kind of I think it's immune is like a really strong word, but the things about politics and the state of the world that used to kind of like get me very discouraged and kind of like sent me on a spiral, they are no longer affecting me that way. I mean, they still affect me, but I still kind of like wanted to continue existing. I'm focused on my own projects, on the things I'm doing, the things I need to do, and that is very I don't know, like that is sometimes all you need, just like an anchor. It's good for you to have multiple anchors, but sometimes like one is the only thing you need. Oh yeah, also I painted my nails. It looks kind of blue. It was green, and I passed this I applied this iridescent one, and now like it looks, I mean, right here it looks green, like now it looks blue, and it's really fun. But the thing that what I wanted to say, what I wanted to talk about today, is kind of like continuing the thing I said in the last video about kind of like these moments where I felt very inadequate and very alone, even though I was surrounded by people who cared about me. And I mean, those two things are not mutually exclusive. I don't think it is uncommon for you to have these moments where you feel like there's nothing out there for you. And it's interesting because like I feel like these little glimpses I had of like they were glimpses of what was going to happen later on, like what I would feel when I started struggling with depression and all that. And it's kind of like interesting because I'm thinking about like that was one situation that really stood out, but like there are others that happen, and they kind of like I'm trying to think of like my recent past, like if there was something similar to that, because I think that is something that I have been able to kind of work on. I'm at a point where that is no longer, I'm no longer kind of tied to like those thoughts and those feelings, because the thing about feelings is that they don't always like walk hand in hand with your thoughts. Like there's so many things that I think that I know, and I still feel the way that I do. So that is like an interesting it's an interesting development for me to have. But yeah, so I was thinking about like these moments, and I think that I've always been very alone. Like I for like long periods of time, like I have been just kept to myself, and I never really thought that I was lonely. But now with like these little glimpses of the past, I'm like thinking that, oh yeah, maybe I did feel that way. Maybe I couldn't recognize that those were the emotions that I was experiencing, but now when I look back, I'm like, okay, that is the case. And I kind of like shut myself down, not down, but like I kind of like put a distance between me and other people, and that kind of led to me should kind of like be creating this notion that like, oh, I don't need anyone. And some of it is good, like you being able to stand up for yourself and just do like what's important to you, what's good for you. But I think that I've always like went too far with that, to the point that I was rejecting people before, like just at the very beginning of like the journey. I wasn't even allowing myself to get to know people and to interact, and that is not something that I've been changing lately, but it is still something that I'm kind of I don't know, because sometimes I feel because I don't have any practice, I struggle to initiate anything, and that is something that I've been reassessing, because I came in contact with this person like last week, and basically I don't know, I think it was just like a casual situation, but this person is starting to display signs that they want something more, and I'm over here like, how I don't want that, but it's not because I'm closed off, it's just that I don't think that this person is somebody that I want to have think deeper with. But it is interesting that I can make this distinction, and it is interesting that I am getting increasingly more I think I'm very aware, but also because I think sometimes I have the tendency to go from like one extreme to the other. So basically what I'm trying to say is that like I don't have to befriend this person, don't have to have a deeper relationship just because I'm now open to situations. And I think I think this is healthy. This is kind of like very much in the middle. Like I thought about it, and I don't want it, but it's not because I don't want any interaction. I don't want like a deeper relationship. It's just that I don't really care about this person. That sounds mean. It's not that I don't care, but like I think the nature of like our interactions, like it's still kind of like I still figure out like how exactly do I let this person out, which is something in the development, because when I was younger I think I would just straight up say it like, okay, I don't care about you and I don't fucking want you in my life, and I'm not there. I'm like thinking like, okay, let me just say this nicely, and because I don't know, because sometimes like it's also I think it's important to kind of like should be noted that I did give this person a chance. I didn't reject it immediately. It's just that when I gave that chance and I'm like, yeah, no thanks. I don't know, I think the more I'm talking, the more I'm like, maybe I should give this person because that is the thing, like I don't want like that nature of relationship. Like maybe we could have like a friendship or something, but I don't think this is what this person wants. So it is in one of those. But I will say it's been a while since I've been put in this situation, and I don't miss it. Basically, it's kind of like the whole thing like, okay, like now we have to really reevaluate things. But yeah, but I think that maybe like in the past, like this would be something that I'll look at and be like, okay, this is good for my ego. But right now I'm just kind of like, nah, I don't need my ego stroking. Like I'm okay. I'm happy with where I am at with my life, and I don't really need these situations to kind of like keep happening. But yeah, so I think that assessing myself in the past, like I really felt lonely at times. This is something that like as I said, I was always like, I'm alone but I'm not lonely. But when I look back, I'm like, I was kind of lonely, and the things that happened, like the traumas I had, like they did not help with anything. They only made things worse, because as I mentioned before, like they got in the way of like me trusting people. I couldn't rely on people. So it was like a whole thing for me, and that didn't help like me kind of like have a good social life. And it is interesting because I'm thinking about like my current social life and how things are, and honestly, like I don't know, it feels like I am at kind of like this I'm in my comfort zone. I'm kind of like open to other things, but it's not to other things, but like I'm open to deepening like relationships that I have. But I think this is always like the same thing. It's like me kind of like realizing that like, oh, I whenever I have like an opportunity, I guess, to establish to kind of like get in contact with people, I realize that like I don't care about the people who are kind of like coming across my life. Of course that's not everybody. I have my friends, I have the people I interact with, but like that's kind of like I said, like this is my comfort zone. I want to kind of like expand, and the people that come to me IRL, like they are not doing it for me. And I'm saying this apart means like, should I reconsider? But the other part is like, no, I don't want that. Like I think continuing that will be kind of like leading a person on, and I don't want to do that. That is not nice, and that is something that, as I said, like it is kind of new, I guess. I mean, I never really led anybody on, but I used to be. It's not that I was mean, but as I said, I was too straightforward, And I think because I was like in that phase of like, okay, I'm telling the truth, like that's what I think, I have a right to think whatever it is that I think. And like right now I'm like, I don't need, I don't want to, I don't know like how to probably express this, but like I care more about people somehow and don't want to hurt their feelings. Like this is because the past, not like I wanted to do that, but I was too careless and I was too much, like living in my own head, that I didn't really notice that way I did things kind of like led to people getting, hurt. Because like life is hard enough. Like there are going to be things always that will hurt our feelings, that is going, they're going to affect us. But like I don't have to add to that. I don't want to add to that. I don't want to, I don't know. Like this is interesting because it is empathy, and it's kind of like there's a bit of like a paradox, a dichotomy here, because on one hand, like I've always cared about things about people having their rights and everybody, equality is important, and the environment and all that. So I've always cared about those things, and sometimes and how I would phrase things, it was always something very conscious for my part. When it came to those things, like bigotry, like that was something I was very kind of like firmly against, but like it was very much something against like the notion, not so much with the people. I think that I didn't really connect with people to be like, okay, this person is suffering from because of this condition, and I want this person to do better. It was always something very generic, and yeah, it was something that kind of like existed more on paper. I think you could argue that I had a very sheltered life, definitely considering the entire population. I definitely was very privileged, definitely more people that are privileged than me, but like what I mean, like I had access to a lot of opportunities and experiences that other people didn't have, and I wanted everybody to have kind of like have the same opportunities. But it is something, as I said, like it was very in theory. It's not that in practice I didn't kind of like that in practice I still kind of like wanted that, but I didn't really have a whole lot of contact with people. So like on one hand you could have people say that I was very empathetic because I was very much focused on trying to make things right by everybody. But on the other hand, like I think in specific scenarios, like I still had like my general kind of like angry and petty attitude, and that kind of like got in the way of like me. I could have maybe done more, be more specific, but yeah, so in that way I could be called empathetic. But like at the same time, I as I said, like I was very careless about the way I approached people, so I wasn't really showing a whole lot of empathy with like the individuals around me. And now I'm kind of like, what, I think I'm more empathetic on a daily basis, like these one-on-one situations I face, and that is an improvement because this shows maturity. It just shows that like I finally got to a point where I'm not letting my insecurities and my fears guide the way I behave. So that is, I'm really happy about that. But it is something that it kind of like it comes to mind every once in a while, like, oh, okay, I've come a long way. Like right now I'm thinking about, because as I said, like I think in terms of like people having the same opportunities, like it's important for you to care about that. So I did care about it, but I didn't, the other, as I said, like more common situations happening on a daily basis, anything that did not have to do with that. Like I was very, I don't think I was ever mean as per se, but I do think that, as I said, I was kind of like careless. I don't think I got to the point where I was ruthless, although I will say that there's been some situations, but like usually they associated with me being a little manic, so there's that. But yeah, but like life was good, and it's good that like right now I'm thinking, it's not that I was thinking only about myself. I mean, kind of was, but like, as I said, like, I think I cared a lot about a lot of things in theory, but like in practice, I wasn't really doing anything about it. It was more something that I was like, I support change. I support, like getting things right. But like, what was I doing specifically? I think I was like mostly words, like so I was talking about it, which, it has some relevance, it has some importance, but that is not what changes, the world. I mean, I could argue that it starts with words. It starts with you, like if you caring about you caring about people, right? It starts there, and people like you talk, and then people might listen. So like that is also kind of, there is a connection there, but you need more than just words to change things, to change the world, and that's kind of I don't know, and that's something that has always kind of like frustrated me, because it feels sometimes like that, like you are just like one cog in the machine, and then you alone can't really enact any type of change. And so if you're kind of like very powerless, and it's not that you give up, but you're kind of like in this like in this very kind of like inertia in a certain way. Like you just keep, saying things, and then you kind of like hoping that they're going to, like they're going to change. And I don't know, like you just feel like you're so small, and that nothing that you can do actually matters. And I think it does kind of like has to do with the fact that like for so many years I was constantly kind of like talking and pointing things out, and trying to change people's minds, and nothing really happened. I don't think I ever changed the mind of like a single person, to be completely honest. I feel like sometimes like with my family, like my parents, like I think sometimes I offer a different perspective, and I've seen them kind of like change, particularly my dad, seeing like him being more conscious, of like what he's saying, what's doing, like the implications of what he says. And so I mean, guess like I did change something, but it's like that is like that is not uh, just like true people, that is not, and they're not even changing, for example, how they're voting. So like it's I don't know, I feel very not incompetent as per like, yeah, not incompetent, but I feel very kind of like powerless. Like what am I gonna do? And I know that the whole thing of like you're part of a group, part of an organization, part of whatever, and then like you're doing your part. There's some significance, but like me alone, particularly because I'm not interacting, like that's the whole thing. As I said, like I'm now opening myself up to opportunities, to kind of like experiences, but it's still very much, it's a new thing, it's something that I don't know. And I feel like the people I do interact with, we are already on the same page, so there's that. I don't know. I do feel I guess like this does make me feel kind of alone in a certain way. I know that this is an experience that like most people have, or just kind of like facing, reckoning, like recognizing the fact that like there's nothing that they can do, and that they're their position, like that doesn't really do much. And I think that I went from kind of like being very, having this fervor about, like the way I approach things and people, and kind of like really believing that there was something I was making a difference, to then go into this other, extreme, where I was like, there's no point to anything, there's no point in trying. And like right now I'm like getting closer to the middle, where I'm like, there is something here, like we're having realistic expectations of what you're doing and what you can achieve, like because like you can always accomplish something, but it doesn't feel like it's enough. Something I've been hearing a lot of is that it's kind of like the way that things are, that's kind of like a pendulum, it kind of like goes, it kind of goes and comes back, goes and comes back, and we're kind of like at the tipping point where like we're gonna go back to this side, which is where I want things to be at. And I don't know if I believe it, but I certainly hope that that is right. I hope those people are right. And I don't know what else, because I don't know what else to do, because the world is like on fire, and that does not make me want to be a part of it, doesn't make me want to be here. So that is something that I have to consider. But it is also something like I can't lose hope, basically is what I'm saying. Or at the very least, like I have to be kind of neutral on this topic, like I can't just, if I can be positive about it, like at least let me just try to be neutral. And I think this is the answer to a lot of like the things, a lot of my conundrums, maybe I can be kind of like be at a positive standpoint, and I kind of like you should be at a negative standpoint. But like if I can at least be neutral, like there will not be it will be better for me, for my mental health, for my sanity. So I think that I'm going to try to implement that increasingly more, trying to be at least neutral, and maybe what it takes for me to kind of like have two things counterbalancing one each other, so like I have this and then I have this, and then it goes kind of like at kind of like this neutral point. But for sometimes like that doesn't really work, because the negative things, like they have more weight. It's kind of like the thing about, for example, you read like 1,000 positive comments, but there's that one negative comment, and like that really shakes you, like so you have kind of like this sour taste in your mouth, because that is kind of like that's kind of just like how that works. I'm pretty sure there are like studies and people can kind of like explain this better, but I think this is a very common sentiment. So yeah, so basically I'm sure that doesn't always work, but I think that I'm trying like not to care, like that would be neutrality. But sometimes it's really hard, because uh, because I don't know, like sometimes, like, the positives, they're not enough. As I said, like, since one thing work out, it doesn't really work. And as I said, like, I can see 10 things working out, but if I see one that it is not, then suddenly it's all like negative. So like the weight of those things, it's kind of like not equal in your mind. So there's that. But back to the whole loneliness thing, I'm kind of like finally at a point where I don't care, and I can't admit that like at different points in time I felt very not alone, but like lonely. You know, I think that trauma is a good example of that state of mind, because you're, I don't know, you isolate yourself from the world, and then you kind of like start struggling, and I was like that for many years. So when I started to get back at it, I didn't have practice. I didn't have experience with, like being with people, which is why, as I said, sometimes things they came across like very, not abrupt, but like very, not rude either. I don't think rude is the word, but like kind of maybe unkind. I'm not trying to be unkind, but like I didn't really have tact. I had, to learn how to properly like interact with people, and I didn't really want to for the longest time, and that didn't help, because basically just I was like, why am I gonna learn to do better if I don't care about this? So that was something that happened. But I think that I'm finally at a point where I care. Like I care about people. I care about people's well-being, and not just the people who are close to me that I love, but like people who I meet. I think that I went from kind of like, because that is the thing that people say sometimes, like because there's two ways of approaching trust. Some people are going to be like, I give you trust, and then I rescind it if something happens, or I don't give you trust, you do something and then I give it to you. And I think that this is how I've mostly been in my life, my whole life. And right now I'm trying to give people more like the benefit of the doubt, and that is something hard to do, particularly when sometimes you hear some things that people say, you think about where they are at, like in their lives, and like how they are kind of they're making things worse, some ways. Maybe it's just like a comment, but like that comment highlights the way the person thinks, and that person is not alone in thinking that. For them to be very bold about the things they're saying, like somebody has to validate them. I mean, some people are just delusional, so of course they don't really need any validation to just do whatever. But I think that most people probably like they're being boldened by like them not being alone. And I think that this is something that goes back to, like, as I said, me feeling lonely, because it felt like I was a one-person army, to be completely honest. And sometimes, because, I mean, it didn't make sense, because I was surrounded by people who thought a certain way that's very different from what I think. And what I think, the way, what they think is very damaging. It's not really good for, like, for individuals, but also not society as a whole. So there's that. And so, like, I think I felt alone, and, in my views. And I was surrounded by kind of like the things that I had growing up. And so yeah, it took me, like, in some cases a really long time for me to just accept that I thought certain things, that I thought a certain way. And right now, like, I'm past that, so I'm already living myself, I'm living my life very freely, and I just say what I want. And also, like, I've been learning how to not say something, because sometimes, like, like that leads to like a whole thing, and it's very pointless, because I'm pretty sure everybody at this point people interact with know what I think. So it's not like I will be saying something new. So sometimes the solution is just remove yourself from the situation. And I mean, it's easier said than done, I know, but I think that I've been kind of like developing a way, or at least a way of like me kind of making my point very quickly, and then leaving the conversation. That is also kind of, because I feel like this very intense urge to say something. So it's a struggle for me. It is not a bad thing, like it's good that I'm kind of like positioning myself and all that. But as I said, I talked about this before, like when I was younger, I kind of like tried in chaos. So sometimes, like, I was just instigating people. I meant what I said, but the way that I said it might be a little inflammatory, it might be a little antagonistic, a little abrasive, and that led to angry responses. And then there was this back and forth, and that was how I kind of like asserted myself in a certain way, because that is how, like, I feel like when you're like in a discussion, and there's something when you're like in doing a fight, it's not really about who's right, who's wrong, what makes sense or not. Like, it is very emotional, and I had like this tendency of like like trying to keep my cool and try to kind of like push people's buttons. And I mean, like, this happened a lot in my head, happened IRL, because as I said, like, I don't know, I don't want to remember those days, like thinking about myself like 18 to 22. And yeah, it doesn't really, there's the whole thing of like me wanting to be kind of like a very dominant force in the environments I was, studying, and anything that, diverged from that, I was very, it kind of like really affected me, and I had to kind of like have this whole kind of like internal PR campaign trying to kind of like correct, like I feel that, the way I positioned myself wasn't strong enough, or something that made me feel like I was weak. So there was always, like, as I said, like this little reality in my head. But yeah, so I think I'm gonna wrap this up right now. But I don't know, I want to talk a little bit more about me feeling lonely. And as I said, like, trauma didn't help, and I didn't really know how to properly, express what I felt, and I didn't fully understand what was happening. As I said, like, right now I'm looking back and I'm like, oh, I had these moments, not only of me feeling alone, but moments where I felt some type of community. And I think that is, something that got me very invested in interacting in online interactions, because you could find people you align with, you could find people who shared interests. So like, you don't feel, I guess, like, I didn't feel as, kind of like lonely. And yeah, so it's interesting. I don't know, man. It's just like, okay, like, that is that's that. And it's kind of crazy. Just, I don't know how this is very small things, they can have a really huge impact in the way that you see yourself, in the way you see the world. So like, but even then, like, my interactions, they were kind of lonely too, because a lot of times I didn't properly interact. I was consuming, for example, content, and then I was, seeing the interactions happening, and I was living vicariously through that. I wasn't myself, like, commenting on whatever, for a variety of reasons. I don't know, I think that I was very scared or being committed to something so intensely. So I had, like, my interests of the week that I would, like, I would kind of like be obsessed with, and then next week I'm finding something else. So I think that, committing to something was kind of hard for me. So, like, but if I'm writing something specific, or if I'm writing a comment, I'm kind of like voicing my opinion directly. Like, that is kind of like, I don't know, it's an admission that I'm, like, into that thing, and I wasn't, I didn't want to be attached to anything. But it's kind of crazy, because, like, I didn't want that. But at the same time, like, I had these fantasies, and these fantasies, like, I feel like everything I lacked, I feel like a huge proponent was, like, me feeling kind of like alone in a way, because it created this realities in which I either didn't really need people, that I was able to kind of like achieve everything I wanted through sheer will, and like, very fantastical, very, not fantastical, but like very delusional. That's the word. So there's that. Or I could kind of like create a scenario in which I did have, people, I guess, usually specific people that existed in a specific way that would kind of like satiate a need that I had. Because I really, to this day, like, I'm thinking I'm doing much better in terms of commitment, but like, I still struggle here and there with kind of like thinking about something that is like forever. Like, that is still, something that I have some issues with, way less than I used to have. But like, I think about how every kind of like fantasy I have, like, there is a certain expiration date, to some, like, the things that are happening, because kind of like staying there, for too long, like, I start losing interest, and or feel trapped. I feel trapped in my own head, in the fantasies that I create. But yeah, so I think I'm gonna wrap this up now. So anyways, bye.